Hi, everyone. My name is Casey Luaders, and I am the host of the Goodie Nation podcast. We're staying connected to you, our local Atlanta innovation space community around the country, community around the world, because this year in particular is very important for us to do that. And so I am actually really excited because we have some super special guests on today's episode. By super special, I mean the man who kind of is responsible for us all being here right now, Joey Womack, and our communicator extraordinaire, Tamay Shannon. And we're going to be talking about part 2 of the 2025 State of the Atlanta Black Tech Ecosystem, sponsored by Tito's Handmade Vodka, because we are celebrating the folks who are supporting us. And as we discussed in our first episode, there was so much just enthusiasm around not just being reactive to what's going on in our climate today, but actually serving as leaders, as organizations, as individual founders and funders and VCs. And part 2 actually got to be in person at the gathering spot in Atlanta. And I'm very curious to hear from both of our guests, their perspectives on what happened and what is happening next. So I would actually love to start with Tamay. Tamay, you were in the room, hearing all the stories, hearing all the conversations. For part 2 of the summit, what stood out to you the most?
It was the energy, the willingness, the excitement, the want to collaborate. People are hungry for community, and that was just absolutely reflected in the room. And the amount of conversations that I saw happening between people after the summit, talking about how can we gather together, how can we get together and make something happen. That was the most exciting part.
Mm-hmm. So, Joey, you made this event happen through literal storms, through the metaphorical storms. From your perspective, how did day 2 of the summit go?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think we should address a little bit like what actually happened and like what it took to actually to make it come to life, right? So you think about what's going on in this country. You think about what's happening in Atlanta as it relates to innovation and tech. And so it was super important that we got this conversation right. We got this conversation right. So we spent a little bit longer than usual planning the event. We wanted to start the year strong. Everybody that knows me though knows that I believe that strong leaders start off the year with a plan, strong set of priorities and goals. So we wanted to come into the year and set the tone for the community. So, from a kind of emotional standpoint, everything was leading up to, January 11th, right? And so for me, I personally tend to time my emotions to crescendo during the event. And then, a few days out, we started looking at the weather and thinking that we realized it may snow. And so there was a this whole emotional tug of war between will it snow, won't it snow? It's happened in Atlanta before where it says it's going to snow. It's been light or didn't snow at all, or go back to the snow apocalypse and all heck breaks loose. And so, for context, the day before it started snowing about 5 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, the day before January 11th, so January 10th. And I got up like 4 a.m. to try to see what would happen. Right. And so as the snow started to come down closer to 5 a.m., I was like, yeah, this is staying not going to happen. So emotionally, it was tough. Right. And so then we had to think about leading the community and then going and telling them what our plan is. Because again, we got to set the tone. And we decided to move it to, about 10 days later, thinking everything's going to be good, making sure all the panelists were good. We had over 1,000 people signed up. And, Rayshawn Pelot, our program mentor for Atlanta Black Tech, he beat me to the punch by about 30 minutes because we both looked at the weather app and saw that it may snow on the day of the second day, so January 22nd. And then it went back and forth, like literally went from like no snow to snow, no snow to snow over the next 7 days. And as they got to the data, we like, oh, I can't believe this happened again. And so then we had to start thinking about, what are we actually going to do? Because I felt like we couldn't, delay the conversation anymore because, as we saw, like post inauguration, stuff was hot and heavy as it relates to the anti-DEI movement. And so again, from an emotional side of things, it was tough. It was tough. We decided to just go ahead and pivot to make the conversation online, but we had still paid for all the stuff for the in-person experience at the gathering spots. Then we had to come up with a whole other type of program for in-person. So essentially we split the Q&A part from the summit into this town hall, right? And so the objective was, okay, we've had the conversation, we understand some of the trends. Let's hear from the community to get their ideas, to get to get their questions answered, so that we could collectively kind of essentially co-create a action plan for the community. So that was my thought process going in. One, I had to manage a ton of emotions, and honestly, going up until February 1st, I was emotionally spent. I just want to kind of get through it, and I was emotionally spent. It affected the physical and stuff like that. And so, I was going in there like, okay, we can get about 400 or so people in the room, which was really good considering we didn't have a ton of time to really properly kind of do any marketing for it. And so, my perspective was, let's get a bunch of ideas. I'm looking forward to hearing a bunch of ideas from the community. They're going to say some really interesting things as it relates to K-12, as it relates to tech workforce, startups investing, but also just generally speaking, building better relationships. So as I started to see the room fill up, I'm like, all right, bet this is going to be great. We're going to get a ton of ideas. We're going to synthesize those ideas and kind of come up later with this action plan. And then we started to open it up to the community for them to share their ideas. So it was essentially an open mic. So podium right in the middle of the chairs and stuff like that. Anybody could come up, and we gave people 2 to 3 minutes to share their ideas for improving the community, right? 2 to 3 minutes to share their ideas to improve the community. And that's where things started to go a little bit different. So what it turned into primarily was people pitching what they're working on. And I've done pitch competitions. I actually just judged one 2 days before over at Morehouse. And I'm used to people pitching, and then people they're blowing past that 3-minute kind of cap. And I'm like, on stage, again, I'm standing on stage by myself, looking out in front of everybody. I'm like, oh, this is not going how I thought. This is definitely not going how I thought. About a third of the way through, I'm like, oh, this is kind of getting to be a little bit bad. But here's the thing. So there's 2 things from this, right? Or a few things. One, there's a lot of people in the room. The energy was palpable. The tension was palpable, and you got a lot of just dope people in the room. So I get it. If you're not used to speaking in front of a large group of people publicly, it can get to you. Especially if you're in the audience and you turn around and you got 400 faces staring at you, waiting for you to come up with the world's greatest idea. Most humans default to talking about themselves, right? So I get it, right? I get it. But that kind of sets the culture. If you've ever been in a group environment, the first set of people that go are going to pretty much set the tone for everybody else. And so that's what essentially happened. But it was cool seeing people talk about things they're super passionate about. I learned a lot of great things, and I could talk a little bit later on about some of the feedback we got immediately after. But it was definitely different than what I expected, though it did present some interesting opportunities moving forward. And I do believe it was beneficial to the community.
Yes. I mean, I think when it comes to being an organization that is working working with community and not for the community, it's going to involve having to, get into the weeds sometimes. Community no community, whether it's your family, whether it's your job, whether it's, you know, society at large, is, I mean, we want it to be a beautiful, cohesive, let's all get together and plan type of situation, but it very rarely is. And so when we say doing the work, like, even though, you know, the energy can be there and like the vibe and everybody's like same mindset, it is indeed doing work when you are, I love how you said co-creating the vision with community. So yeah, that's very commendable. I'm curious to know, Tamay, was there anything that surprised you, similarly to, you know, Joey said things didn't exactly happen the way that they were originally envisioned. Was there anything for you that was like, oh, I didn't expect that?
I think the surprising thing for me was I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm used to like pitching and getting people like buy my business, all that good stuff. But what I found that people really responded to, interestingly enough, was the pitches. And I think it just goes back to people wanting to be in community. And so if you're new to tech, if you're new to Atlanta, people call Atlanta cliquish. People call Atlanta like, you know, if you know somebody, you can get in. If not, you're going to be outside cold. And so I think what this event served was two purposes. One being that the people who are looking for community, who are looking for self in technology, that when they showed up, they were surprised to see and hear hope beyond hope, that there's so many Black people doing so many dope things. The stuff that I've seen on social, the people's comments really reflect that people were like, oh my goodness, I was hoping this was going to be a great event for the Black folk, but it actually was, and I'm excited that it was, and I can't wait to be involved more. So people have been like, hey, how do I get invited to the Slack? Hey, how do I join Atlanta Black Tech? And I've been seeing that on social. And so that was a surprise, that it really drove people to say, okay, this is the community for me. I absolutely want to join, or I want to be more involved, or I want to take more action. That was one thing. And then the other thing that really surprised me was the different sectors, or different, not only verticals, but levels of expertise. So there were, you know, from first job in tech all the way to investor repeatedly, right? Like there was the whole range of it. So it really was the opportunity from different facets to really have their voices heard. And it was the fact that everybody did show up. And we want some more people to show up. We want teachers. There's, you know, STEM people, our STEM educators. We really want to show up more. Children, we want to show up more, because they are absolutely going to shape how we move forward in that particular industry. But those, I would say, off the top of my head, those are the two things that surprised me.
Can I add on to things that surprised me?
Please do,
Well?
yes.
So, and this is like for the second straight time. So, during the summit, and also during this session as well, we used live audience polling to get their thoughts. And so the first question was, how do you feel about the current state of the Atlanta Black Tech Ecosystem Summit? And what I can say, just in the tech ecosystem in general and stuff like that, is because of everything going on in the space, right? Because of everything going on in the space, you know, you see all this stuff, the huge anti-DI movement, and a few things are coming out every single day that has happened, you know, really going back before the election, but definitely since the election, right? For those of us, I think, that are closer to policy and politics and decision making at some of the higher levels and stuff like that, it feels like the world is falling down, right? The world is falling, everything is falling down around it. The world is ending and stuff like that. I'm not saying that's not necessarily true, but that's what it feels like the closer you get to, you know, the people up there making these horrible decisions and stuff like that. But for the second straight event, we saw this during the online summit, the virtual summit, and we saw it during the town hall. The overwhelming response, like the one-word response to how are you feeling, people were saying they're hopeful and excited. And that's what surprised me. It surprised me, you know, during the summit a few days ago, or about 2 weeks ago now. And it definitely surprised me again on Saturday. And so I think that shows that there is somewhat of a disconnect between people, again, closer to policy and politics and all these decisions, and then everyone else in the community. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Like, I think it's a good thing, actually. I mean, it's an opportunity for some of the community leaders to truly understand how the rest of the community is feeling, quite honestly. And I think there's something that we can learn from the rest of the community, in terms of being excited and hopeful when things maybe not. I talked in the last few weeks about this concept of neutral thinking and stuff like that. And that can allow you to essentially, so super quick, my understanding of neutral thinking, you just don't assign negativity to facts, right? You just look at facts for what they are and don't assign anything negative to essentially remove the negativity from your thoughts. And so putting that into practice is what a lot of people in the community are doing, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. But it's something that I think a lot of us community leaders should really take to heart, and also spend much more time talking to the rest of the community in order to actually feel a little bit better. Because quite honestly, what has surprised me, like the more I'm actually physically around people, and this kind of makes sense, right? The more I'm physically around people, the better I actually feel.
There's something that both of you said that like kind of struck me. Tamay, when you said, I want more types of people at these events, teachers and youth, and maybe people who traditionally, maybe they don't even think that they are a part of the innovation economy. And I think that is a really important point when we're thinking about community. It's not just, I am a coder and I am a founder of my tech company. Like, this community is incredibly nuanced. And Joey, to your point about the hopefulness, like, it is so easy to just get sucked into the doom, just either the literal doom scroll, the just doom scroll of life. But that's another reason why these community spaces are so important, just to look to your left, look to your right, and be like, oh, if you're here, you must really be about this life. And if we're all about this, then like, what do we have to be afraid of? So I think that's amazing. And on that point, we talked about the journey that it took to actually get to the summit happening. What happens now? Now that we've had the conversations, we've gotten the feedback, we've been surprised by, what the community is feeling and wants to say, now what?
Yeah. So now it's about action, right? Now it's about action. And I'll share some of at least one of the ideas that I thought was interesting, excited to hear perhaps what Tamay thought about some of the stuff that was shared. Again, lots of pitching, but there were some ideas. One of the more interesting ideas that I heard was to do a debate series, right? And so Black people, we typically talk about, I don't know, there are formal discussions around this, but generally speaking, at some point in your life, you're probably going to fall within the, Booker T line of thinking or WEB line of thinking, right? Or essentially, right? And so through that link, and that's a popular debate, right? About philosophy, about how to effectuate change and stuff like that. And I think it could be interesting in order to build relationships between people in the community, right? To have these debates on perhaps what is our best path forward. It's from a philosophy standpoint or strategy standpoint. What is the greatest threat to the community? Kind of things of that nature, right? A debate series is not necessarily going to solve our biggest problems per se, but I do think that interesting ideas can come from it. But more importantly, it starts to bring people together. So I could imagine that we hosted like a small debate series at our office on Fridays or something like that. Or maybe just to kind of test it out, right? 20, 30, maybe 35 or so people. I might imagine that we could take some of the monthly Atlanta Black Tech dinners and turn those into mini kind of debates, right? And so these are, again, the monthly dinners are anywhere between 6 to 10 people. And each of these dinners could have a debate topic, and then people kind of sign up and kind of go from there. As long as it doesn't turn like super heated, I think we're okay, right? And so, again, as we talk about building relationships, that debate piece debate idea. And I don't know who said it, unfortunately, because we didn't capture the names of the people who submitted their information online. But that was one of the more interesting ideas that I saw, and I'm actually interested to see it come to life relatively soon. But before I kind of talk about some of the other next steps, I want to kick it to Tamay if she has any thoughts or any ideas that she heard that were interesting.
So I actually found a lot of the ideas interesting, and really for me, my marching orders as I look at how do I really have social amplify what ABT is doing is getting where you fit in. And so I really want to make sure that I highlight opportunities and resources so that if somebody's like, look, I can spin up a whole program, I could be the head of it. Cool. Got something for you. Somebody's look, all I can do is once a myth meeting. And I'm like, great, dinner series is for you. So there was a lot of really cool ideas, like for part one. So I was like, hey, you should actually run for school board. That is a thing that you can do that will absolutely change, how the school runs, how the school district runs. And I was like, wow, I never even thought it's weird, but in my head, I was like, school board, parents only. That's not the case. That's not even, what was I thinking? And the fact that somebody said it has me thinking differently. So I want to make sure that the ideas that I amplified that we got from part one and part two allow people to see the opportunity where they can get in where they fit in and have them take action.
I love it. I know for me, in terms of what's next, I was, and again, this is kind of going back to your question around what is different. So I was actually on the day after the town hall, I was talking to Andrea Miller, the moderator from the K-12 panel. I was telling her, like, I think I've bitten off more than I can chew when it comes to the community development stuff. But this is where the real work comes into play, right? And so very specifically, we are essentially kind of breaking down all the ideas from the summit, from the panelists, from the registration. So when people registered for the actual summit, all 1,200 people, they had the opportunity to submit their ideas. We had hundreds and hundreds of ideas. We have our own ideas at Goodie Nation from a team perspective. And then we have all the ideas from the town hall as well, right? So we're essentially synthesizing all these ideas and kind of consolidating them down into a few buckets, right? So I'm going to say, buckets that are light to implement, or relatively light implementation. Let's call it medium, and then hard. And we're going to do it across 4 areas, right? So the community part, K-12, tech workforce, and then startups and investing, right? So you think of like a table, right? You have K-12, where you have community, K-12, startups and investing, and you have, light, medium, and then hard. And so for each of those kind of quadrants, essentially, or boxes, we're going to have three top ideas, and we're going to start to focus on, especially the ones that are relatively a light implementation, and start the process of the hard as well. So, for example, again, we've kicked off this week the monthly dinner series. We had a number of people also sign up to be moderators of the Slack group channels. We're going to start to speak to students at the K-12 level that are in STEM programs. So we're trying to work with South Atlanta High School to get a date and a time in order to get some of the folks from the community kind of share their stories and things of that nature to students, down there and stuff like that. One of the really interesting ideas from some of the speakers on the K-12 side is around making sure we know the name of every single STEM is CTAE coordinator in Metro Atlanta, right? So again, from a responsibility perspective, we've got to know the names of the people that are doing the work in terms of training our kids, right? And if you can't do it for the entire Metro Atlanta area, at least do it for the schools, the group of schools where maybe your kids or your family members are at, and or near where you actually live, right? So those are kind of some of the ideas that we're taking and moving forward. Also, kind of, and I can keep on going on and on because there are hundreds of ideas, but we'll be starting to put a little bit more effort toward our angel investor training program. So you'll start to see some things pop up relatively soon, just to kind of gauge people's interest in learning the basics of angel investing, and then putting those folks through a program to kind of dig deeper.
No, I mean, this buckets metaphor. I love that, again, as it was mentioned earlier, if you want to be involved in helping to strengthen the Atlanta Black tech ecosystem, you don't have to sign up for a full-time volunteer role to run a program. You can go to a dinner, you can join the Slack channel, you can be a part of a program that interests you, whether it's angel investing, whether it is, whatever it may be. And so Tamay, I guess for anyone listening to this podcast and they're like, oh, I do want to know how I can get more involved, or how can I learn about more of these things? Where can they do that?
So the easiest thing to do is go to Atlanta Black Tech, and that's atlblacktech.org, and sign up, join the community. It's free. That is the first thing to do, and that's going to give you access to the Slack channel and opportunities that come our way. We also are making sure that we're beefing up our jobs channel, so we can make sure that we are funneling opportunities to people who need them. So getting that inside track, right? That's the thing that always gives you that leg up, is the inside track. And so we have various channels on Slack, not only for collaboration, for jobs. If you're building an MVP and you need somebody with this technical expertise, there's somebody in Slack who's got it or who knows how to get it. So that is the center of how we collaborate and really change and impact Atlanta.
Fantastic. Joey, I am going to give you the last word.
Yeah, so there's two things I'll say in closing. One, this concept of neutral thinking, again, as it relates to everything kind of going on in the world right now. It's definitely tough. We have to be disciplined, and we can train ourselves just to remove the negativity so that we can essentially properly function. The other big insight that I want to share is, again, this whole concept of detachment. So we didn't get a chance to talk about it during the ecosystem summit, and it started out in the K-12 kind of K-12 panel prep work. And so the concept of detachment is essentially, a lot of these computer science and STEM coaches in public schools literally don't even think of themselves as part of the tech community. They don't go to events. They don't go to all these different things. And so it's really important that they go to stuff. And the reason why they actually don't really get integrated is because, they got a lot of stuff to do during the weekday, right? They're around these bad kids, you know what I'm saying? So anything like after school or on the weekends is like a no-go for them. And so, but what it causes, though, they're not really plugged into what's happening in the tech space. Now, on the other side of things, a lot of the people in the tech workforce and startups and investing space, they're not plugged into the earlier point. They're not plugged in what's happening with schools. And so it just creates this weird scenario where we're not efficient as an ecosystem, right? We're not efficient as an ecosystem. And so that detachment theory is really prevalent. We can, and I'll close and say this, detachment can also be applied to what I said earlier around how some of the community leaders don't truly understand how the rest of the community feels about the current state of tech. A lot of leaders are like doom and gloom. The rest of the community feels hopeful, right? That's a problem, that there are two vastly different perspectives, but it's also an opportunity for us to create some solutions that address these things. So moving forward, my ask is, in addition to what kind of Tamay was saying, and for people to tap in, is for leaders out there, anybody listening to this podcast, to explore this concept of detachment and plug in, and then we can kind of move forward.
I think that's great advice. And again, I think collectively, this is going to be the first of many storms, whether real or metaphorical, that we are going to be going through in this current state of our existence. But tapping in with community, finding folks who are, like you said, if you don't think that the tech ecosystem involves you, if you want to get in, but you're not sure, like, who do I talk to about this? There is community for you, and Goodie Nation and Atlanta Black Tech is incredibly excited and hopeful. Let's hashtag hopeful about what this year and the years beyond this year are going to look like for our community. And so I am so grateful again for both of the two of you and the work that you did, and the entire ABT team, Goodie Nation team, for pushing through, making sure that this important event happened. And this is only the beginning, so stay tapped in. We're looking forward to having conversations with you all here on the Slacks, in person. Stay tuned for everything that we have planned. And okay, this is kind of weird because I've stolen your catchphrase, Joey, and you're sitting right here now. But as Joey always says, stay magnetic and outwork yesterday. Thanks for listening.
Peace out.